People always think the strangest part of my job is the screaming, but honestly, the screaming stopped bothering me months ago. What still terrifies me is the rule I broke last night, the one rule the owner wrote in blood red ink on my first day. Don't speak to guests after midnight, no matter how human they sound. But when the woman in room 6 knocked on my door, she called me by a name I haven't told anyone in years. They never told me the motel was alive. Not in words, anyway. They just expected me to understand of the first night of knocking. If you've never worked a night shift in the middle of a dead desert, let me explain something. Silence isn't peaceful. Silence is loud. It presses on your chest, crawls up your throat, and whispers things you swear you didn't think. Out here, the quiet feels personal. And after midnight, it feels hungry. I've been managing Dry Creek Motel for 9 months now. Or 10. I keep mixing up the weeks. Time is strange here, the same way the sky is strange. Like the stars don't line up the way they should. My office sits right under the dirty neon sign that flickers vacant instead of vacancy, because the middle tube burned out years ago. The owner said fixing it wasn't worth it. People don't come here for comfort, he told me. They come here because there's nowhere else to go. He's not wrong. The first time I met the owner, he handed me a ring of keys, a ledger older than my childhood, and a laminated card of rules. No welcome speech, no small talk, just the rules. Rule number 1 was circled in red ink. Do not speak to guests after midnight, no matter what they say. When I laughed, he didn't. When I asked why, he just slid the card back across the counter and said, "Because I said so." He left before I could ask anything else. I tell you all this so you understand. I didn't break the rule on purpose, or at least, that's what I tell myself. It was one of those nights where the sky looked bruised, purple-black and swollen with heat. The desert wind pushed sand under the office door in soft, constant sighs. I'd been staring at the buzzing security monitor for hours, watching dust roll across the parking lot like tiny ghosts. Nothing ever happens before midnight. Nothing ever really happens after midnight, even lest you count the sounds. Sometimes footsteps, sometimes whispers under doors, sometimes crying, sometimes laughter, and once, something that sounded like breathing right behind me, even though no one was there. But that night it was the knocking that started it. 3 knocks. Not loud, just sharp enough to break the air. I remember freezing with my hand still on the coffee mug. The clock on the wall had just hit 12:03 a.m. I know because the second hand made that faint clicking sound right as the knocks came. I stared at the office door, and the door stared back at me. "Front desk is closed," I called out automatically. "Come back in the morning." The knocks came again. 3, precisely spaced. Not impatient, just deliberate. You have to understand something. No one should have been up. Every room was rented, but all the cars were cold. All the lights were off, and the kind of guests who come to Dry Creek Motel aren't the type who wander around looking for company. I sat there, gripping the counter edge, waiting for the person to leave. But then a voice, soft, female, calm. "Can I talk to you, Daniel?" My stomach dropped so fast, I heard the blood rush in my ears. Because that's not my name. Not anymore. I haven't used it, spoken it, written it, or even thought it in years. And I swear I never told anyone here. The voice repeated, a little closer to the crack in the door. Please, Daniel. It's important. That was when I stood up. Or maybe I didn't. Honestly, this part gets blurry every time I try to remember. I know I walked to the door. I know my hand touched the knob. I know my heart kept beating too fast, like it was trying to outrun something I hadn't faced yet.
Who?
Is this? I ask through the wood. No answer, just quiet breathing. The desert wind slammed against the window, rattling the glass. The neon light outside flickered brighter, then dimmer, then brighter again, stuttering like it was warning me. I should have walked away. I know that now, but she said my name, once more soft, trembling, familiar. Daniel, you promised you'd listen this time. I didn't promise anyone anything. Not recently, anyway. But my chest tightened as if some old memory clawed its way up, demanding attention. My hand twisted the lock. A click, a breath. A moment I can't take back. I've told people I only opened the door a little. Just a crack. Just enough to see a sliver of pale skin and maybe the edge of a blue sleeve. But the truth is, I don't know how wide I opened it, or if I opened it at all. Sometimes I remember pulling the door open fully, the warm desert night brushing against my face. Sometimes I remember the door stuck shut, like something held it closed from the outside. Sometimes I swear I wasn't even at the door. I was still at the desk, paralyzed, watching the knob turn on its own. All I know for certain is this. When I blinked, she was gone. No footsteps, no retreating shadow, just the slow creak of a vacancy. Sign above me and a desert wind that suddenly felt colder than it should. I stayed there for a long time, staring at nothing, waiting for the voice to return. But it didn't. Not then. Only later did I find the first note slipped under my door. Blue ink, slanted handwriting, and a message that made my throat close. You can't ignore room 6 forever. I didn't understand what that meant. Or maybe I refused to. Either way, that was the night everything changed. The night the rule stopped being a warning and became a consequence. And room 6. Well, that's where the real story begins. The note sat on my desk all night, its paper curling at the edges from the heat. The ink smudged from my thumb where I kept touching it like I needed to confirm it was real every time my eyes passed over the words. You can't ignore room 6 forever. By sunrise, I'd convinced myself it was a prank. Some bored traveler, some drunk, someone who couldn't know what they shouldn't know. But the moment the sun dipped again behind the... Why did you leave? She asked softly. I don't know what you're talking about. My voice cracked. I hated that she heard it. You do? She whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. You always pretended not to, but you do. I stayed near the door, close enough to escape. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The woman reached down and dragged a small suitcase from under the bed. It was old, covered in scuffs, like it had been thrown from a moving car. She clicked it open. I didn't step closer, but the second she lifted the lid, a rush of metallic scent hit me, like rust, or blood, or something older. I blinked in. She snapped the suitcase shut before I saw what was inside. "You're not ready to look," she murmured. "What was that?" I demanded, my voice sharpening. "Proof. Proof of what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head slowly, studying me as if comparing me to some older version of myself. "You really don't remember, do you?" she whispered. "Or is it easier to pretend you don't?" My jaw clenched. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." Her expression didn't change. "Say the name," she said. "Say your name. I told you, that isn't my name anymore." She stood suddenly, moving closer. Too close. Her breath ghosted near my cheek. "But what you did," she whispered, "didn't disappear when you changed your name." The room seemed to shrink around us. The shadows in the corners crept closer, reacting to her voice. The air felt thick enough to choke on. I stepped back toward the door. "I'm leaving." I said, "You always leave." The words were almost a sigh. "Just like you left me." My throat closed. Somehow, it felt like both an accusation and a memory. As I reached for the doorknob, she spoke again, but this time, her voice was different. Lower, strained, like someone else speaking through her. "Room 6 remembers you, Daniel. Even if you don't remember it." I stumbled out into the parking lot, slamming the door behind me. The night air felt colder than it should, like the temperature had dropped 20 degrees while I was inside. I didn't look back, not at the door, not at the window, not at the faint silhouette that now pressed against the curtain. But as I reached the office, a new sound started behind me. A soft, steady tapping tap. Tap. Tap tap, not on my office door, on the window of room 6. Almost like an invitation. Almost like a heartbeat. And I knew before the night was over, I'd be forced to go back. I should have left the motel that night. I should have driven until the desert swallowed the neon buzz of Dry Creek Motel Hole. But instead, I went to the storage room. The room is small, dusty, and smells of mildew and old paper. No one goes there but me, the night shift manager, and the owner, though he hasn't set foot here in months. I know that because the padlock is still rusty from the last time I climbed over it to check the supplies. I didn't come for supplies. I came for the ledger. The ledger is leather-bound, blackened at the edges, and smells of smoke and time. It's thick, heavy enough to hurt if I dropped it. The kind of book that doesn't belong in a motel, but in some forgotten vault beneath. A church or a courthouse. It was the owner's, the only link I had to him beyond his sparse, cryptic rules. I flipped it open. The pages were filled with dates, names, and notes scribbled in a hand that trembled sometimes, pressed too hard. At others. And there, in the middle of the entries, was my name. Daniel, 3 times. Scratched out, rewritten, and circled. I swallowed hard, the air suddenly thick. I don't know if it was the heat, the fatigue, or something else entirely, but the shadows in the storage room seemed to lean closer as I read. The walls themselves whispered. I could hear it if I concentrated. A low, dragging murmur, like someone exhaling behind me, though no one was there. One line made me stumble backward. He doesn't remember. Will not remember. Keep him out of room 6. I didn't understand. I still don't. Not fully. My pulse thumped against my ears. I ran my hand over the page, smearing the ink. Part of me wanted to tear the book apart, hide it, destroy it. Another part wanted to memorize every word, even if it meant my mind would fracture along with it. I turned the page. More names, more dates. Some crossed out with violent scratches, as if the owner had tried to erase people from existence, not just from the ledger. The entries weren't orderly. They were chaotic, jagged. And some pages had drawn thin lines of stick figures, each figure marked with X's over their faces. Sometimes faces scratched out so completely they bled through the paper. I looked up. The storage room seemed darker than before, though no. Clouds had passed across the moon. Dust motes swirled in the single weak bulb hanging overhead. I could feel it's something just beyond my vision, a presence that shouldn't exist but did. A whisper reached my ear, low, almost tender. Daniel. I spun. Nothing. Only the ledger in my hands. Who's there? I said, my voice cracking. No answer. I flipped another page. And then I saw her, the woman from room 6, in the drawing. Only, it wasn't a drawing. Not exactly. She had been here before, long ago. The figure wore the same blue sweater, the same posture, hands folded over a suitcase. Her eyes were X'd out in the sketch. A sudden breeze rattled the door behind me. I dropped the ledger. The thud sounded deafening in the silence. My fingers trembled. I knelt to pick it up, trying to convince myself it was just a draft, just the wind. But the ledger lay open to a page I hadn't seen before. The room remembers. Even when he forgets. Even when she's gone. I didn't know if she was room 6's guest or someone else. My thoughts fractured. Memory collided with reality. Did I really see her that night? Or had I imagined the entire encounter? The ledger didn't answer. Then the intercom crackled. I froze. The sound was high-pitched, the static scraping at my eardrums. Daniel, a small, almost childlike voice said. My hands tightened on the ledger. The voice came from nowhere, and everywhere at once. I swear I didn't touch the intercom. Stop. I whispered. My own voice sounded foreign in the empty room. Stop calling me that. But the voice didn't stop. It repeated once, twice, faster this time, almost mocking. I stumbled backward, backing into the corner. My breath came in shallow. Daniel, I froze. The room felt like it had doubled in size, shadows reaching, curling, pressing against me. I knew, even before I saw her, that she was there. But this time, the moment I stepped into the hall, I realized something horrifying. She wasn't alone. Another shape emerged from the shadows, taller, broad-shouldered, silent, watching. I couldn't make out the face, and maybe that's the point. I didn't want to see it. I stumbled toward room 6. Each step felt heavier, like gravity had doubled. My pulse thumped in my ears. Every instinct screamed to run, but the presence behind me whispered memories I couldn't escape. Flashbacks hit me like stones. A child's laughter, high and sharp. A suitcase dragged across a motel hallway. A body, lying still, too still. The voice I used to call my own. My hands, shaking, trying to pull it away, trying to stop it. I blinked, and the hallucination or memory disappeared. I was in the corridor again, The door to room 6 loomed ahead, slightly ajar, inviting and terrifying at once. I reached for the knob. My hand froze halfway. The woman was there. Not a silhouette. Not a ghost. Not entirely. She stepped forward, face calm, eyes accusing. "You remember now," she whispered. "You can't pretend anymore." I tried to speak, tried to deny, but the words died in my throat. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Room 6 wasn't just a room. She wasn't just a guest. I wasn't just a night manager. I'd been here before. I had seen her before. And worse, I had left. The memory hit with crushing force. My hands had been on the suitcase. I had promised to protect it. And then I hadn't. "You left her," the voice said. "Not hers. Not entirely. Somewhere between memory and the present. Somewhere between accusation and confession." My legs gave out. I fell to my knees. The carpet was rough, hot from the neon light above. Shadows twisted around me, curling, pressing. The desert wind outside howled through the cracks in the windows. "Daniel," she said again. Closer now, touching the sleeve of my jacket. "You can't hide from what you did." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. I didn't, but I had. I had left. I don't remember why. Or maybe I do, and my mind refuses to fully accept it. I remember the fear, the shame, the satisfaction. No, regret, maybe. It all blends together. Memory and guilt are messy, unreliable things. She crouched beside me. Her eyes searched mine, unblinking. And for a moment, I thought she might forgive me. Or maybe she was just trying to make me remember. Trying to make me feel. "Look," she whispered. "This ends tonight." The room twisted. The walls pulsed. The ceiling stretched upward, shadows elongating. I swear I saw my own reflection in the darkened window, pale, hollow-eyed, the face I had forgotten. And behind me, another reflection, my own, but older, harsher, angry, accusing. "You are him," the voice repeated. "Somewhere, everywhere." Room 6, the window, the desert beyond. The suitcase appeared again, open, empty, or full. I couldn't tell. I couldn't focus. My mind was breaking, fraying at the edges. I reached inside, but the contents were nothing, or everything. Memory and guilt made solid. "You know what you did," she said. Not her voice, not mine. A mix, distorted, and now you'll remember it. Every night. The neon flickered violently. Shadows leaped across the walls. I couldn't tell if the shapes were moving, or if I was moving, or if the room was alive. My breath came fast, shallow. I tried to turn, tried to run, but something stopped me. Something invisible. The desert wind pressed against the door. The air was too thick to move. And then I heard it. A knock. 3 sharp knocks. Not at room 6. Not at the office. At the window. I froze. My chest felt like it would explode. And then the impossible realization hit me. The voice their voice was mine. I was calling myself. A final reflection appeared in the glass. My own eyes staring back, hollow, accusing, waiting, I realized. Finally, what the ledger and room 6 were trying to tell me. I wasn't haunted by her. I was haunted by me. The knocking continued, steady, patient, relentless, and I understood, with a sickening clarity, that it would never stop, because I could never escape. Daniel, the last thing I remember before the world blurred was her smile. Not warm, not cruel, just inevitable. And the desert night pressed closer, swallowing the motel, the neon, and me whole. Story number 3 before I tell you what happened last night. You need to understand something. I've never actually seen any of the bodies move. Not once. Everyone keeps saying I did, but I don't remember it that way. I remember following the rules, that's all. But the security footage, it shows something else entirely. If the dead ever wanted to tell you something, they wouldn't whisper. They'd wait until you were alone enough to hear it anyway. That's what I keep telling myself, even though I'm not sure I believe it anymore. That's how my nights usually start at Harrogate Funeral Home, with a lie I whisper to myself like a prayer. I always say I'm not scared. I say it every evening, right before I clock in, right before the building swallows me whole. And maybe I mean it when I say it. Or maybe I'm just repeating what Mr. Graff told me on my first night. Fear is disrespectful to the dead. They can feel it. I'm never sure if he was joking. HARROWGATE is an old place older than the cracked stone sign outside. Older than the rusting pipes humming through the walls. It has this weight to it. A heaviness that settles on your shoulders the moment you step inside. The lights always buzz, even though Mr. Graft swears the wiring is new. The floors always creak, no matter how softly you walk. And the stillness guard, the stillness, that's the worst part. It's not just quiet. It's the kind of silence that feels like it's listening. Most people assume working the night shift here is peaceful. They imagine a calm, orderly space, where nothing changes and nothing moves. That's what I thought too, before I learned about the rules. They aren't written in any employee manual. They aren't framed on the wall or handed to you on paper. No, Mr. Graft taped them to the inside of the prep room door with old yellowing tape, like they'd been there for decades, maybe longer. He made me read them twice. Rule 1, never uncover a body after midnight. Simple enough at first glance. Except sometimes, when families bring someone late, you have to check tags, confirm identities, adjust clothing. And midnight doesn't politely wait for you to finish. I asked Mr. Graft once what would happen if I went a minute or two over. He looked at me without blinking and said, "Then don't." He didn't explain further. Rule 2, if you hear knocking from inside a drawer, don't open it. This one bothered me the most. Not because of what it says, but because of the way he said it quietly, as if remembering something, as if remembering someone. I laughed back then, thinking it was a scare tactic. New guy hazing, but the smile on his face never reached his eyes. Rule 3, never answer the landline after 3:03 a.m. Why that time specifically? Why a landline that barely works and rings maybe twice a week? I tried to ask him once, but he only said, "Some calls aren't meant for us." I still don't know what that means. Rule 4, if the basement lights flicker, do not look down the stairs. This rule is the easiest to follow. The basement is where we keep the overflow old equipment, broken coolers, extra tables. It smells like metal and mildew. The stairs leading down are narrow and steep, and the light at the bottom barely reaches halfway up. Even without the rule, I wouldn't look down there. I always tell myself the rules are outdated superstition, little rituals passed down through generations of funeral directors. I say that out loud sometimes, just to hear a voice in the building. But when I'm alone in that prep room, with the humming freezers and cold metal drawers, the rules feel less like suggestions and more like warnings carved into stone. Mr. Graft comes and goes like a shadow, moving slowly but always appearing exactly when he needs to. He's older than the building looks, late 70s, maybe early 80s, and his face is the color of paper left in the sun too long. He speaks softly, almost reverently, like every word is meant for the dead rather than me. I've worked with him for months, and I still don't know where he goes during the long stretches of the night. Sometimes I hear footsteps upstairs, even when he's sleeping in the office chair. Sometimes I smell cigarette smoke drifting down the hall, even though he hasn't smoked since the 90s. He always tells me he trusts me. You're careful, he says. You follow rules. But the way he says it makes me feel like he's trying to convince himself. Tonight, the prep room felt colder than usual. The metal drawers seemed to hum louder, like distant buzzing behind the walls. There were only 3 bodies in the building, all tagged, all quiet, all still. And yet, while I stood in front of the prep room door, rereading the rules, I swear, I heard something like breathing, not a human breath, something slower, something thicker, like air moving through heavy cloth. I told myself it was the ventilation. It usually is. Usually, when I walked past the first row of drawers, I kept my eyes straight ahead. I always do. Staring at the metal doors for too long makes you imagine things, shadows, the faintest impression of movement. Sometimes, when the lights flicker, the steel reflects in ways that make it look like something inside is shifting. It never is. Or at least, that's what I keep saying. I cleaned the tools, logged the intake numbers, checked the cooling unit's routine. Work. Work that shouldn't require fear. Work that shouldn't require rules older than the building itself. And yet my hands kept shaking for reasons I couldn't name. When I finished, I glanced at the clock. 12:07 a.m. 7 minutes past midnight. My stomach dropped when I realized I had been adjusting a covering sheet on one of the bodies, just moments before, just adjusting, not really uncovering, not fully. I don't think it counts. It shouldn't count, but the rule doesn't say fully. It just says never uncover a body after midnight. And the worst part isn't that I broke it. It's that I can't remember whether the sheet was already pulled back when I walked in, or if I'm the one who moved it. They told me the landline doesn't even connect to an outside line anymore. So explain to me how it rang last night, and explain why I knew before I even picked it up exactly who would be on the other end. That's what's been replaying in my head, looping like a bad recording, the shrill, ancient ringing of a phone that shouldn't ring. A phone that, according to Mr. Graft, hasn't worked since before I was born. I keep saying I didn't. Answer it. I say it firmly, confidently, even though the memory keeps shifting like a puddle under headlights. Sometimes I remember standing across the room, staring at it. Sometimes I remember picking it up slowly, my hand trembling for a reason I can't explain. Other times, I hear a voice in my ear so clearly I can still feel its breath. But officially, if anyone asks, I didn't answer it. The night started quietly enough, though quiet is never actually comforting in Harrogate. It's more like a threat that hasn't decided how to strike yet. I tried to distract myself with paperwork, focusing on neat lines and dates, pretending the rules weren't taped to the door behind me like a list of promises I'd already broken. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, louder than usual. 2:50 a.m. Still early for the strange things. Most of the oddities, if they happen, tend to happen after 3. I kept glancing toward the hall where the landline sits mounted on the wall. The old rotary kind with a cord so curled it looks like it's choking itself. The phone has dust layered. Under the plastic, you could write your name on it with a fingertip. Sometimes, when I pass it, I swear the dial twitches. Just a little. Just enough. Around 2:55, I heard footsteps upstairs slow, dragging one's butt when I checked. The lights were off, and Mr. Graff's office door was closed. If he was in there, he didn't answer when I called his name. He never does at that hour. I went back to the prep room, pretending everything was normal. And then, exactly at 3:03 a.m., the phone rang. Not the cell phone in my pocket. Not an alarm. Not some electrical glitch. The landline, the ring was sharp, metallic, impossibly loud, like someone had struck a metal bar. My whole body froze. I could feel the rules burning behind me. Rule number 3. Never answer the landline after 3:03 a.m. For a moment, I thought maybe the clock was wrong. Maybe it wasn't really 3:03. Maybe I could justify picking it up. But the ringing didn't care about my excuses. It came again, longer this time. Almost frantic. And here's the part I keep getting wrong when I retell it. Sometimes I swear I walked toward it. Sometimes I'm sure I ran away from it. Sometimes I'm positive I didn't move at all. But the version that feels truest, the one that makes my stomach twist, the one where I slowly lifted the receiver, I don't remember doing it, but I remember the voice. Soft, wet, whispering my name like it had practiced. You still there? That's what it said. Not hello, not who it was. Just that question, as if we'd already been talking. I think I dropped the receiver, or maybe it slipped. But I remember the slow swing of the cord as it dangled, the faint sound of breathing still coming through the speaker. When I looked up, someone was standing in the hallway. A woman. I recognized her from earlier that week. The sister of a man brought in after a car accident. Her name was Mara. Last time I saw her, she was crying so hard I thought she'd collapse. But now she looked different. Awake. Too awake. Her eyes were swollen but alert, fixed on the prep room door like she'd been listening the whole time. She whispered, "Did he call?" Her voice cracked, not with grief but with expectation, like she'd been waiting for a specific event. Like she knew the phone would ring tonight. I told her she shouldn't be here. No visitors after midnight, especially not ones wandering the hall unsupervised. But she didn't seem to hear me. Instead, she stepped closer and whispered, almost pleading, "Do they ever wake up confused before you prepare them?" My throat tightened, and I didn't know what to say. because the way she asked, the fear behind it made it feel like a question she already knew the answer to. Before I could respond, the phone rang again. This time, the receiver wasn't even on the hook. It was still swaying by the cord, tapping softly against the wall. And yet, it rang. I swear I didn't move. I swear. But Mara's eyes widened, terrified, and she backed away like the sound itself burned her. "Don't answer him," she whispered. "Not tonight." And then she was gone. Or maybe she'd never actually stood there at all. I remember her walking away, but I don't remember hearing footsteps. The ringing stopped. Silence swallowed the hall again. I walked back into the prep room, heart pounding. I tried to steady myself by focusing on the drawer's cold metal fixed labels, unmoving. But one of them caught my eye. Drawer 6B dot. It wasn't supposed to be occupied. We had 3 bodies that night, all logged in drawers to A3C and 4D, but 6B, the handle was slightly pulled out. Barely an inch, but enough to notice. Enough to send a spike of cold through my spine, and then faint. Almost imagined dash knock. Just one. Soft, from the inside. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the stool. Rule number 2 hit me like a slap. If you hear knocking from inside a drawer, don't open it. I didn't open it. At least, I don't think I did. I don't remember opening it, but later, when I checked the clipboard, drawer 6B was marked as occupied, signed in with my initials. Timestamped at 3:06 a.m., 3 minutes after the call. I swear on my life, it wasn't me. But the signature looks exactly like mine. And the worst part, the name on the toe tag. I know I've seen it before, just not on the living. I keep telling myself I didn't see it move. But then, how else could it have gotten there? Maybe it wasn't supposed to be there at all. The night after the 3:03 a.m. call, everything in Harrogate felt off. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was a waiting thing, heavy and humid, like the air itself had teeth. I kept glancing at drawer 6B, the one that had knocked at me the night before. The one that somehow was now marked as occupied with a body I didn't recognize. I shouldn't have been surprised. Not really. Harrogate has a way of bending time, of stretching nights so long that minutes feel like hours. But when I opened the door to the prep room, it was as though the air itself whispered, "Look closer." I remember stepping toward the drawer, hesitating, every nerve screaming not to open it. Rule number 2 echoed in my mind. If you hear knocking from inside a drawer, don't open it. I told myself it had to be a mistake, a mislabeling, a leftover from the previous day. But even as I told myself this, my hands were moving almost of their own accord. My fingers found the cold metal handle and pulled. The drawer slid open with a hiss that sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness. Inside was a body. Not a body I recognized. Not one on the log. And yet the toe tag looked right. It had a name, a date. Everything about it was exactly as it should be. Except for the fact that I swear it wasn't there yesterday. Its eyes were closed, but the corners of the mouth curved up just slightly, like a secret smile. Not peaceful, not sleeping. Smiling, smiling at me. I jerked back. The air turned thick in my throat. My chest hurt, but I didn't look away. I couldn't. I could feel its presence like it was pushing against the air between us. The smell of formaldehyde mixed with something sweeter, rotten sweetness. I bent closer, telling myself I was imagining it. But when I saw the fingernails, clean and intact, I could swear I recognized the hands. Not the person, the hands. I'd touched them before, or at least I thought I had. My head started spinning. The clock above the prep room door ticked silently. 12:42 a.m. Time didn't make sense. I stepped back. Something cold brushed my shoulder. Not the body, not a drawer. Something else. Something behind me. My heart jumped. I spun around. Empty hole. Just the humming of the freezers. The shadows in the corner seemed thicker than they should be. Then I heard its footsteps. Slow, dragging, deliberate. Not upstairs this time. Not Mr. Graft. Closer, down the hall. Coming toward the prep room. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide, but my legs refused. I was frozen, staring at the smiling body. "Did you move?" I whispered to it, though I knew it couldn't answer. Then I remembered Elias. Elias had been here before me. A former night shift worker who disappeared months ago. Some say he went mad. Others say he saw things no one was supposed to see. Mr. Graft refuses to talk about him. But I've heard the stories how he claimed the dead sometimes move when no one looks. How he said bodies have memory and anger. How he warned the rules were not for protection, but for control. I never believed him, until now. I glanced around the room, counting the other drawers. 2 were occupied, the 3rd was supposed to be empty. But 6B, the new body, didn't match anything on the logs. And yet, it did. The tag, the timestamp, the initial zit, was all accurate. My mind reeled. Could it have walked here, on its... The screen flickered to life, green and grey lines painting ghostly shadows on the walls. There were feeds from every corner of the building hallways, prep rooms, stairwells, basement doors. At first, it looked normal. Too normal. And then, I saw myself, or a version of me. On the monitor, I was moving down the hall. Drawer 6B was open, my hands hovering over it. My mouth was moving, but I couldn't hear what I said. The clock on the screen read 3:06 a.m. 3 minutes after the landline rang. I shook my head. That can't be me. I didn't. Mr. Graff's finger hovered over the monitor. He didn't answer. He never does, with explanations. He just let the footage roll. I watched myself open drawers I knew I hadn't touched. I answered the phone at 3:03 a.m., speaking to a voice I had no memory of hearing. I walked down the basement stairs while the lights flickered, my head tilting. In slow, deliberate curiosity, exactly what rule number 4 forbade. I hadn't done any of it, and yet, the footage was there, clear as day, unmistakable. I pressed pause, leaned closer. My reflection in the monitor shimmered, distorted by static. For a second, I thought I saw something behind me, something with pale, hollow eyes and a faint smile. I spun around, empty hallway. But when I looked back at the screen, the shadow wasn't gone. It had moved closer. "Why?" I whispered. Mr. Graff didn't answer. He never does. Instead, he left the room. I was alone with the footage. Alone. With what I might have done, alone with what had happened, alone with what I couldn't remember. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was editing. Maybe someone was playing a cruel joke. Maybe I'd blacked out, lost control. Maybe the dead had just started moving. I ran the footage again, frame by frame, and that's when I saw it's something impossible. In the prep room, when I bent over drawer 6B, the body moved. Not like it fell, not like it shifted with gravity. It lifted its head, slowly, and its lips curved into a smile I had never seen before. A smile that didn't belong to the living, or the dead. I froze. My hands shaking, I ran to the basement stairs. The lights flickered violently now, more than before, casting jagged shadows up the walls. The stairwell was empty, absolutely empty, and yet when I looked down, I could feel it, watching me, waiting, counting, smiling. I stumbled back. My head slammed into the doorframe. Stars flashed across my vision. The monitors flickered. And in the reflection of the screen, I saw him. Not me. Not Mr. Graft. Someone or something standing right behind the cameras. Grinning, pale, hollow-eyed. I spun around. Nothing. I looked back at the footage. The figure was closer now, and the body in 6B, it wasn't lying anymore. I swear it leaned forward, reaching. I screamed, a high, strangled sound that echoed through the halls, bouncing off stone and steel. The monitors went black. I stumbled. Backward. The silence was heavier than before. The air thick, sour, alive. I could hear whispers low, unintelligible, coming from every corner at once. And then a voice, my voice, coming from the landline ringing again. 3:03 a.m. I dropped to my knees, shaking. I couldn't answer it. I wouldn't. Not again. But the hand moved on its own, slowly, deliberately, lifting the receiver and the voice on the other end. It whispered one word I'll never forget. Remember, I screamed. I don't remember what happened after that. I don't know. If I ran, if I hid, if I even left the building, all I know is this. The footage, they won't let me see it again. Mr. Graft insists it was for my own protection. But every night since, I hear whispers behind the drawers. I hear knocking from empty spaces. I hear the phone ring at 3:03 a.m. And every morning, I wonder if what I saw on that screen was me, or if I'm still watching from somewhere else. The rules, I realize now, weren't meant to protect me. They were meant to delay it. To delay. Whatever remembered me, and whatever it is, it never forgets. Story number 3, before I tell you what happened last night, I need you to understand something. I didn't break the rules. Not really. The dead moved first. At least that's what I remember. Or what I'm choosing to remember. The security. Footage, it shows something different. But the footage is lying. It has to be. Because if it's telling the truth, then I'm responsible for the thing inside drawer 17. And I swear to you, I never touched it. I shouldn't have heard anything that night. That's what keeps bothering me. If I had just ignored the first whisper, if I had pretended it was nothing, maybe everything after that would have stayed where it belonged. Behind the drawers, behind the rules. behind the lies I still tell myself. I know I'm supposed to start at the beginning, but the truth is, I don't remember where the beginning actually is. So I'll start with the part that makes the most sense, the night shift. The part of my life I thought was simple, quiet, safe. But nothing in that building was ever quiet. And safe was just a word I used to convince myself I wasn't scared. The funeral home is older than anyone admits. You can feel it before you even step inside, the way the air sinks around your shoulders, the way your breath feels heavier for no real reason. I used to tell myself that's normal, just a trick of humidity, or maybe the mind adjusting to the idea of being surrounded by bodies. But even on my first night, something about the place felt occupied, and not in the way a funeral home is supposed to be. I worked the night shift alone, which is either the best thing or the worst thing, depending on how quiet you need the world to be. For me, silence is dangerous. It gives my thoughts too much room. But Mr. Codim insisted night duty was a test of discipline, and back then, I really wanted him to trust me. I still don't know why. The rules were written on a small metal plate above the time clock. 5 sentences etched so deeply you could feel the grooves with your fingertips. I read them every night before clocking in, like a prayer. Or maybe a warning. But rule 1 was always the one I remembered without trying. Don't listen to them. It sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, doesn't it? Them, like the bodies were going to start reciting poetry or arguing about taxes. I laughed the first time I read it, and I think that laugh is the real reason everything went wrong. The building hears you when you don't take it seriously. But I didn't know that then. The embalming room is where the whispers always start. I'm not supposed to call them whispers. Fisper Kadeen prefers the word sounds. Says using the wrong word encourages the wrong interpretation. But they were whispers. Soft, thin, sliding under the metal drawers. Like something too shy or too weak to speak clearly. The first few nights, I blamed the vents, the pressure, the temperature. Changes. That's what any reasonable person would do. But here's the thing. I'm not always reasonable. Not at night. Not when I'm alone. And definitely not when the lights flicker the way they did that night. I was checking inventory gloves. Cotton, disinfectant when the first whisper reached me. A small sound, like breath dragging across a cold surface. I froze because something about it felt directed at me, intentional, as if the drawer itself had leaned forward. I told myself it wasn't real. That's what I always do. It's easier to doubt your own senses than accept the alternative. People think hearing things means you're losing your mind, but it's more complicated than that. Sometimes it means your mind is remembering things it shouldn't. When the second whisper came, I moved closer to the drawers. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe fear disguised as responsibility. Maybe, if I'm being honest, it reminded me of something from before. Something I don't want to talk about yet. Don't listen to them, I whispered to myself. More out of habit than conviction. That's when I felt the presence behind me. Not a touch, not a movement, just the kind of feeling that pushes into your spine when someone stands too close. I spun around and nearly dropped my clipboard. And there he was, Mr. Kadeen, standing in the doorway like he'd been carved out of the shadows. He has this way of looking at you that makes you feel like you've already done something wrong. Like he's caught you in the middle of a confession. You haven't spoken yet. His eyes drifted past me to the drawers, then back to me, then to the metal plate with the rules. "First night alone with the new arrivals," he said quietly. "You seem unsettled." "I'm fine," I lied, just adjusting to the quiet. He didn't smile. He never smiles. He just nodded once, slowly, as if he was agreeing to a lie he'd heard many times. "Stay focused," he said. "The building has distractions." I wanted to ask what that meant, but his tone made it clear he wasn't inviting questions. He walked past me, ran his hand over one of the drawer handles, and whispered something in a language I didn't recognize. A word, maybe a warning, maybe something older than that. Then he turned to leave, pausing only long enough to say, "Remember rule 1. As soon as he left, the whispers returned softer but closer. And here's the part I haven't admitted. Before, I didn't just hear them, I answered. Only a single word, a single breath of sound. Something so small, so careless. I convinced myself it didn't count as breaking the rule, but it did, because the whispers changed immediately. They sharpened, focused, as if they'd been waiting for acknowledgement, waiting for permission. I don't want to tell you what they said. Not yet. It's easier if you don't know everything at once. But I will tell you this. Whatever was inside drawer 17 heard me, and it never forgot. And the worst part, I think I recognized the voice. I didn't want to go back into the embalming room the next night, but pretending I wasn't scared felt easier than admitting the truth. The whispers had followed me home. Not in the literal sense, nothing spoke. Inside my apartment, but the memory of them clung to me like cold air. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that soft, familiar breath wrapping around my name, stretching it into something fragile. I told myself it was stress, fatigue, imagination, anything but the other. Possibility. The funeral home looked different when I arrived. Not physically, but atmospherically, like someone had dialed down the warmth and replaced it with a heaviness that pressed against my skin. It reminded me of the moment before a storm hit, when everything becomes too still. Even the lights seemed dimmer, though I knew they were the same bulbs I'd replaced last week. Mr. Kadim wasn't there when I clocked in. Normally he hovered, inspecting everything with that unreadable stare, but tonight his office door was shut and dark. I lingered outside it for a moment, fighting the urge to knock. Part of me wanted him to tell me I'd imagined everything, that the building was old and I was overreacting. Another part of me knew he wouldn't. He never sugarcoated anything, and whatever he wasn't saying weighed more than whatever he did. When I finally pushed open the embalming room door, the smell hit me first. Not the usual chemical mix, but something metallic and damp, like cold iron. My breath caught. The room was colder than before, far colder than the thermostat allowed. I walked deeper inside, trying not to look at drawer 17, even though it felt like it was pulling at my vision. There was a new body that night. I recognized the tags on the stretcher before I registered the shape beneath the sheet. No name, just a number and a symbol I didn't understand. Two intersecting lines forming a shape that made something in my memory twitch painfully. I'd seen it before, somewhere I shouldn't have. But the more I tried to remember, the more my thoughts slid away like water. Whispers fluttered at the edge of my hearing. Not clear enough to understand, but unmistakably intentional. I inhaled sharply and forced myself to look at the ceiling vents. Air pressure, I muttered. Just the vents. But the vents don't know your name. I didn't hear the door open behind me, but I felt the air shift. A moment later, a familiar voice spoke. Don't stand so close to it. I turned. Mr. Kadim stood in the doorway, his posture stiff, his eyes fixed on the new body. His expression wasn't fear. Exactly, it was something tighter, something restrained, like he was holding back knowledge he wished he didn't have. I wasn't doing anything, I said, though I had no idea why I felt the need to defend myself. You were listening, he replied. I could always tell when you start listening. My stomach dropped. You make it sound like they're saying actual words. He didn't correct me. He just stepped forward and pulled the sheet back a few inches. The skin beneath was pale, almost waxy, but otherwise normal. No visible wounds. No signs of decay. It looked freshly dead, but something felt deeply wrong anyway. Where did this one come from? I asked. Don't concern yourself with that, he said. Concern yourself with the rules. I glanced at drawer 17. Its handle gleamed faintly under the overhead lights. My voice barely worked. Did you put it in there yet? Not yet, he replied. I wanted you here first. Why? So you don't make the same mistake twice. My heart hammered. I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, but a loud metallic click shattered the silence. Both of us spun toward the drawers. One of them had moved. Not fully open, just a shift. Subtle but deliberate, like something inside had pressed outward. Not drawer 17. Not yet, but the one beside it. See. I whispered, unable to hide the tremor in my voice. That wasn't the body, he said quickly. Old mechanisms. Temperature expansion. Neither of us believed that. The whispers returned, louder this time, sliding beneath the metal like hands searching for a grip. My skin prickled. I took a step back, but the sounds followed, growing sharper. They sounded almost like arguments, or pleas, or threats. You need to leave this room, he said abruptly. Why? What's happening? You're too susceptible. Susceptible to what? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked past me, placing himself between me and drawer 17. He whispered the same strange word I'd heard the night before, his tone urgent, almost desperate. The whispers faltered for a moment, then receded like a tide pulling away. But they didn't stop, and from drawer 17, a single, clear breath echoed outward. It wasn't a whisper, it was my name. I stumbled back so hard, I hit the counter. My vision blurred. The room felt like it was tilting forward, pressing me toward that drawer, as if the air itself wanted me closer. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, could only hear that voice, familiar, broken, stretched through memory. Don't answer, Kadim snapped. Not this time. I hadn't realized I was leaning forward until he grabbed my shoulder and yanked me back. His grip was stronger than I expected for his age. His eyes were wider than I'd ever seen them, the mask finally cracking. You told me the rules were ancient, I whispered. But you never said why. I didn't think I had to. Well, you do now. He hesitated. For a moment, I thought he might finally tell me the truth. But instead, he released my shoulder, stepped back, and said the one thing that terrified Me more than the whispers. It's not the bodies you need to fear. Before I could ask what he meant, drawer 17 slid open a full inch, and the whisper that came out wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a voice I thought I'd never hear again. I can't tell you exactly when the shift from fear to something else happened. It wasn't a single moment. It was a slow seep, a leak in my sanity. Every night after the whispers called my name, every time I felt eyes where no one stood, something inside me started to unravel. By the time I returned to the embalming room that third night, I wasn't just nervous. I was different, a little raw, a little untrustworthy even to myself. I told myself I was going in prepared. I would follow the rules this time. Don't listen, don't respond. Keep your hands to yourself. But the second the door creaked open, I realized rules aren't enough when the house itself wants your attention. The air was thicker than usual. My gloves stuck to my fingers as if the humidity had turned the room into something more viscous. Every drawer gleamed under the dim light, every shadow stretched in ways that felt deliberate. And there, in the corner, stood Mr. Kadim again. He didn't say hello. He didn't even glance at me. He just nodded toward drawer 17 and left, as though his movement alone was an order. But the way he looked, it wasn't just concern. It was fear, subtle but unmistakable. Fear has a smell if you know how to read it. I could smell it then. I approached drawer 17, slowly, hesitantly, pretending I wasn't curious. I was curious. I've never been less honest with myself. The moment my fingers brushed the handle, I felt a shock, almost imperceptible thrum, like a heartbeat from within. And then I heard it clearly. A voice I had buried somewhere deep, a memory I'd tried to hide. It wasn't just calling my name. It was speaking to me in fragments, fragmented sentences that slid across the space between memory and imagination. Why? Did you leave me? I froze. My heart thumped so hard I thought it would echo through the room. I hadn't expected that. I had expected whispers, maybe shadows, maybe cold air brushing my neck. But that was personal. It was intimate. It wasn't just a ghost. It was someone. Someone I knew, or thought I knew. My pulse was faster than my thoughts. And then I did the unthinkable. I leaned closer. I know. Rule 1, don't listen. Don't acknowledge them. But I couldn't stop. The voice scratched at the edges of my reason. Each word, each syllable, wound itself into the gap between fear and memory, and I leaned closer still. I didn't leave you, I whispered back. My voice shook. I didn't mean to, I wanted to add, but the words stayed lodged in my throat. The drawer cricked not, because I pulled it, I swear. At least, not fully, but it moved, just enough. Just enough for the thing inside to be aware that I was listening, and suddenly the room didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. It felt alive, and it was judging me. The voice spoke again. Not louder, just clearer. You came too late. I stumbled back. My knees hit the cold tile floor. I wanted to rationalize it. Logic has always been my shield. Maybe it was stress. Maybe the heat, the air pressure, the chemicals. Maybe I was hallucinating. But even as I told myself that, I knew my mind was lying to me. Something was real here. Something terrible. I heard footsteps then behind me. I didn't move. Didn't turn. Because I already knew who it was. Knew it wasn't human. Not entirely. The shadows shifted, stretching unnaturally. And there, in the corner where no light reached, I thought I saw a figure that shouldn't exist. Familiar yet distorted. A reflection of someone I once loved. Or betrayed. Or both. I can't explain why I did what came next. Maybe it was courage. Maybe it was foolishness. Maybe it was guilt demanding to be heard. I reached toward drawer 17 again. Just a fingertip, nothing more. But the second I touched the handle, the temperature dropped so sharply my skin burned. And then I realized whatever was in there wasn't just waiting. It was expecting. It had been waiting for me to break the rule. And now I had. Twice. The first time was accidental. The second, the air was thicker than usual. My gloves stuck to my fingers as if the humidity had turned the room into something more viscous. Every drawer gleamed under the dim light. Every shadow stretched in ways that felt deliberate. And there, in the corner, stood Mr. Kadim again. He didn't say hello. He didn't even glance at me. He just nodded toward drawer 17 and left, as though his movement alone was an order. But the way he looked, it wasn't just concern, it was fear. Subtle, but unmistakable. Fear has a smell if you know how to read it. I could smell it then. I approached drawer 17, slowly, hesitantly, pretending I wasn't curious. I was curious. I've never been less honest with myself. The moment my fingers brushed the handle, I felt a shock and almost imperceptible thrum, like a heartbeat from within. And then I heard it clearly. A voice I had buried somewhere deep. A memory I'd tried to hide. It wasn't just calling my name. It was speaking to me in fragments. Fragmented sentences that slid across the space between memory and imagination. Why did you leave me? I froze. My heart thumped so hard I thought it would echo through the room. I hadn't expected that. I had expected whispers, maybe shadows, maybe cold air brushing my neck. But that was personal. It was intimate. It wasn't just a ghost. It was someone. Someone I knew, or thought I knew. My pulse was faster than my thoughts. And then I did the unthinkable. I leaned closer. I know. Rule 1, don't listen. Don't acknowledge them. But I couldn't stop. The voice scratched at the edges of my reason. Each word, each syllable, wound itself into the gap between fear and memory, and I leaned closer still. I didn't leave you, I whispered back. My voice shook. I didn't mean to, I wanted to add, but the words stayed lodged in my throat. The drawer creaked not, because I pulled it, I swear. At least, not fully. But it moved. Just enough. Just enough for the thing inside to be aware that I was listening. And suddenly, the room didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. It felt alive. And it was judging me. The voice spoke again. Not louder, just clearer. You came too late. I stumbled back. My knees hit the cold tile floor. I wanted to rationalize it. Logic has always been my shield. Maybe it was stress. Maybe the heat, the air pressure, the chemicals. Maybe I was hallucinating. But even as I told myself that, I knew my mind was lying to me. Something was real here. Something terrible. I heard footsteps then behind me. I didn't move. Didn't turn. Because I already knew. Knew who it was. Knew it wasn't human. Not entirely. The shadows shifted, stretching unnaturally. And there, in the corner where no light reached, I thought I saw a figure that shouldn't exist. Familiar yet distorted, a reflection of someone I once loved, or betrayed, or both. I can't explain why I did what came next. Maybe it was courage, maybe it was foolishness, maybe it was guilt demanding to be heard. I reached toward drawer 17 again. Just a fingertip, nothing more. But the second I touched the handle, the temperature dropped so sharply my skin burned. And then I realized whatever was in there wasn't just waiting, it was expecting. It had been waiting for me to break the rule. And now I had. Twice. The first time was accidental. The second time, deliberate. And I couldn't stop myself. I whispered to it, soft, almost inaudible, "I'm here." The response was immediate. The drawer slid open, slowly, deliberately. And I swear to you, the voice said my name like a curse, like a plea, like both at once. I don't know how it knew what I'd done, but it did. And then the smell hit me. Not the embalming chemicals, not the cold air. Something fouler, something alive in decay. I gagged, but my feet didn't move. My mind didn't move. I was frozen. I saw the body, not fully, just the eddies, enough to know it was familiar, enough to make me doubt every memory I'd held about the past. And the whispers multiplied, hundreds of them now, pleading, accusing, laughing, crying. And they weren't all coming from the drawers. Some came from the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. I wanted to scream, but the sound stuck in my throat. Mr. Kadim's voice finally cut through. "Step away from it." I obeyed, slowly, reluctantly. But I could feel the presence reaching toward me even then, like smoke curling around my skin. He looked at me with eyes that had lost some of their authority, revealing what I can only describe as dread, pure dread. And then he said something that made my blood run colder than anything I'd felt before. "Whatever you see, whatever you hear, don't trust it, not entirely, not even yourself." I didn't ask him what he meant. I couldn't. My mind was too tangled with fear and memory and guilt. I only knew one thing for certain. Whatever was in that drawer wasn't just a corpse. It wasn't just a whisper. It was my past, my mistake, my punishment, and maybe my reckoning. And as I backed away, clutching the edge of the counter, I realized the most terrifying thing. I wasn't sure whether the thing inside was awake, or if I had woken it. And the worst part? I think I did both. I shouldn't have looked at the footage. I knew that the moment I pressed play. But curiosity has a way of gnawing at you until you give in, and I had been gnawed raw for weeks. Weeks of whispers, shadows, and memories that didn't match reality. Weeks of wondering if I was imagining the entire thing, or if the funeral home was deliberately making me see what it wanted. The security monitor flickered as I leaned over the console, my fingers trembling. The time stamp glowed red in the corner. 2:03 a.m., exactly the hour I'd first heard the whispers. I tried to remember how many nights had passed since then, but the memory felt fractured, like broken glass reflecting pieces of the truth. The First clip showed me entering the embalming room. I was almost eerily calm. My movements were deliberate. I checked the drawers, adjusted a sheet, glanced at the corners of the room. Nothing unusual, or so it seemed. Then the camera angle shifted. The view from above drawer 17 made me freeze. My hand reached toward it. I hesitated, and then it moved. Not by me, at least not fully. The drawer. Real. It's not real. It's not real. But the voice followed. My name. My regrets. My guilt. All of it wrapped into a cold, pressing weight. By the time I reached the exit, I realized two things. One, Mr. Kadim was gone. No explanation. No warnings. No hand on my shoulder. Just the echoes of everything I'd done wrong. Two, I couldn't leave. Not really. Because even now, in the silence of the night, I feel it. Drawer 17 is still calling, still awake. And part of me knows that. If I go back, if I watch the footage again, I'll see myself doing things I haven't done yet. Or maybe I already have. The monitor flickered one last time before cutting to black. And in that darkness, I heard it clearly. A single, definitive word, welcome back. And I realized then, the building, the rules, the drawer, the body. None of it was ending. Not for me. Not for anyone. Because some things don't stay dead. They wait. Patient, watching, judging, and sometimes, just sometimes, they let you touch them, and that touch changes everything. Story number 4, I know what everyone thinks happened to her. They say I'm lying about the last time I saw her, but that's because I haven't told anyone what the camera really caught. Not even the part where she was still smiling after she was already gone. The narrator paused, then, look. If I seem nervous, it's because the police still haven't seen the real footage. The one she sent me at 11:59 p.m. The one nobody believes exists. I probably shouldn't start the story like this, but whatever, I don't have much left to lose. So here it is, straight from the moment everything tipped sideways. I knew something was wrong the second I saw her smile. And before you jump into the comments, calling me dramatic or attention hungry, let me explain. Lena never smiled like that. Not at me, not at anyone, and definitely not at midnight from a place she swore she would never return to. Anyway, hi, or whatever YouTubers say. I'm not used to talking to a camera, so forgive me if I ramble or stare off too much. It's just that thinking about that night, it still crawls under my skin. I've tried recording this video maybe 6 times now. Every version sounded fake. The lighting was wrong, or my voice shook too much, or I sounded guilty. I'm not guilty. I need you to understand that before anything else, I'm not the bad guy here. But you're not here for disclaimers. You're here because of her. Because the internet loves a mystery, especially one wrapped in tragedy. You want to know what happened to Lena? You've seen the headlines, the compilations, the conspiracy TikToks. You probably think you already know the truth. You don't. The night she disappeared, I wasn't even supposed to be awake. I'd been lying in bed, scrolling through useless videos, trying to distract myself from the fight we had earlier that day. Friends fight all the time, right? Except we weren't exactly friends anymore. Or maybe we were. It depends on which version of the story you believe. She said we were better off as just friends, but she also said she still needed me. And I don't know. I thought I understood what she meant back then. It was 11:59 p.m. when my phone buzzed with her name. The time stamp burned itself into my brain. Lena, I think I found it. No explanation, no context. And then the selfie came through right after it. That selfie. The one you've seen blurred out in news clips. The one her sister begged the police to release. The one everyone keeps debating about on forums. I remember staring at the screen, waiting for the punchline, because she had to be joking. There was no way she was actually there, not at that hour, and not alone. She wouldn't do that to me. She promised me she wouldn't go back after what happened last time, after what we saw together, or after what I told her I saw. Whichever version makes more sense to you. I didn't open the picture right away. I know that makes me sound awful, but you have to understand I thought she was messing with me. Lena loved pushing my buttons. She always wanted to see how far she could go, how much she could get me to react. It was her thing. But then I read the message again, and something felt off. The wording, the timing, the silence that followed. She usually spammed texts, but that night, just one message, one image. So I tapped it, and instantly, the entire room around me felt colder. Not metaphorically, me in the air actually dropped. Or maybe it was just adrenaline. I don't know anymore. The photo showed her standing in front of that old wooden trail signed one the rangers boarded up last year. Yaukno, the one from the rumor videos. The one that supposedly leads to the ravine where the two hikers went. Missing. The sign was weathered, half covered in moss, and the letters behind her were warped like they were sinking into the wood. If she really was there, then she had broken her promise to me in a way that felt almost cruel. But the smile that was the worst part. Too wide, too fixed, too deliberate. It didn't match her eyes, which looked strangely glassy, as if she was staring past the camera instead of into it. And before you say anything, yes, I noticed that the moment I opened the image, but I didn't let myself think about it. People see what they want to see. You probably want me to admit something dramatic here, like I knew right then she was in danger and I ignored it. That would make a good twist, wouldn't it? But the truth is, I didn't know what to think. It didn't feel real. It felt staged, like she wanted to scare me or test me or force me to chase after her. She did that sometimes. Or maybe I'm remembering it wrong. Memories get weird when you replay them too many times. I stared at the photo for a long time, longer than I should have. I kept zooming in and out, analyzing her expression, the shadows behind her, the crooked angle of the trail sign. I didn't notice anything unusual. Not then. Not really. Except there was this faint blur behind her shoulder, like motion caught. Mid-frame. But phones glitch all the time when the lighting's bad, right? And just the vibration. She went pale. I reached for the phone, but she yanked it away and whispered, "It knows." I laughed, because what else was I supposed to do? She didn't laugh back. That night she messaged her sister Mara, though I didn't find out until later. Mara called me the moment the news spread, her voice sharp enough to cut through the static on the line. She said Lena had told her she wasn't safe with me anymore. I told Mara she misunderstood. I told her Lena was paranoid and exhausted and making up stories again. Mara didn't buy it. She said she knew fear in someone's voice, and Lena had sounded like she was running from something. Or someone. I remember feeling angry, not because of what Lena said, but because it wasn't true. At least, not in the way Mara assumed. I never threatened her. I never hurt her. I need you to understand that. But I did know things about her she didn't want anyone else to know. And maybe that was enough to scare her. Maybe I pushed too hard when I should have listened. But that isn't even the part that keeps me awake now. What keeps me awake is realizing how many details I ignored. That same afternoon, Lena told me she kept seeing movement in places that were supposed to be mirrors, windows, dark phone screens. She said it felt like her reflection wasn't syncing with her anymore, like it lagged half a second behind her body. I thought she was being metaphorical. I thought she was trying to describe anxiety. But then she said something that chilled me even then. He's trying to line up with me. I asked who she meant. She didn't answer. She just shut her bedroom door and stayed inside for almost an hour. When she came out, she acted like nothing had happened. I should have pressed her then. I should have asked what she meant or why she looked so hollow afterward, like she'd left part of herself behind that door. But I didn't. I didn't want to be the one she blamed for making everything worse. And maybe that cowardice cost her more than I want to admit. Because here's the thing I remembered. When she showed me her face that evening, her eyes didn't track the way they usually did. It was subtle, but they seemed to focus on something past my shoulder, like she was waiting for someone else to answer my questions. And when I called her name, she jumped as if waking from a dream. I didn't understand it, not then. But now, I wonder if that was the moment she slipped away. I didn't want to talk about the app. I told myself I would leave that part out, skim over the details, pretend it wasn't important. But every time I tried recording this chapter, the words jammed in my throat until I admitted the thing. I've been avoiding since the investigation started. I was watching Lena long before the police knew. Not constantly, don't twist it like that, but enough to know more than I told them. Enough to know she wasn't alone in the days before she vanished. Look, it wasn't spying. I know it sounds like spying, but the app was originally meant for emergencies. She installed it herself after a night she came home shaking, convinced someone followed her from campus. The tracking feature gave her peace of mind, or that's what I told myself. I only checked it when I was worried, and those last few days, I was worried all the time. You would have been too if you'd seen the things I saw. The night of the selfie. After she didn't reply, I opened the app. I wish I could say I hesitated, that I debated whether it was an invasion of privacy, but honestly, I didn't. I just tapped her name, and the feed opened like it always had. Except her camera was pointed at the ground. Dirt, leaves, a sliver of moonlight hitting the edge of her shoe. At first, I thought she'd dropped the phone, but then I realized the screen wasn't shaking at all. Her breathing wasn't echoing through the mic. It was just still, unnaturally still. I should have called someone right then. I didn't. I just stared at the screen, waiting for movement, any movement. After a moment, the phone began to tilt upward slowly, as if being lifted. I held my breath. It felt like the whole world held its breath with me. And then the image straightened, facing the woods, the trees stretching like dark ribs into the sky. But it wasn't Lena holding the phone. I know how insane that sounds. Believe me, I know. I've heard every insult, every accusation online. He's lying. He edited the footage. He hurt her and is covering it up. But none of those theories touch what I saw that night. None of them come close, because when the camera lifted, it didn't show a hand. No fingers curled around the frame, just the rising view, as if something tall and unseen had picked it up. The angle was wrong, too smooth, too steady, like the phone was weightless. And there was no breathing, no footsteps, nothing except the faint rustle of branches. I remember whispering her name out loud, like she could hear me through the screen. Then I whispered it again, softer, tasting the fear in my throat. The trees ahead shifted. Something moved between them. Quick, deliberate, wrong. The camera didn't focus in time. It just caught a shimmer of motion, like the outline of a person half drawn. Then the feed cut out. Black screen. No signal. I stared at my reflection in the blank display for what felt like an hour. Maybe it was 10 seconds. Maybe it was less. I don't trust my sense of time anymore. Not after everything she told me. Everything she tried to warn me about. When the feed finally reconnected, the screen showed something else entirely. A room. A small, dim room with peeling wallpaper and a mirror on the far wall. It wasn't Lena's room. It wasn't any place I recognized. The mirror was old, spotted with age, the kind that warps your reflection just enough to make you question what you're seeing. And in that mirror, facing the camera, was Lena, except she wasn't moving. She stood completely still, like a mannequin posed in perfect imitation of her. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring straight ahead. Her arms hung at her sides. Her hair, which she always kept tucked behind one ear, fell over her face like tangled vines. I whispered her name again. The figure in the mirror didn't react, but something else did. Behind her reflection, deeper in the room inside, the mirror's warped darkness, something shifted. A flicker, a face, maybe. A shape leaning forward as if studying the camera. Its movements were out of sync with Lena's reflection, like the mirror was showing two versions of the world at once. The one where she was frozen, and the one where something else breathed behind her. I know I should describe it better. I know you want details, but the truth is, I can't. Not because I don't remember, but because remembering makes it real in a way I'm still not ready for. The thing in the mirror wasn't human. Or maybe it was. Maybe it was just wrong in a way that my brain refuses to categorize. The kind of wrong that makes your body didn't. Things that nobody should know about anyone. Things that made me feel like I was inside a nightmare I couldn't wake from. After that night, everything became a blur. The phone notifications, the vibration alerts, the sound of her name echoing in empty rooms. I couldn't tell what was real and what my mind fabricated to punish me. I kept replaying the footage, trying to freeze frame the second face, trying to prove it to myself. Every time I did, it felt like someone or something was moving closer behind her reflection. And the worst part, sometimes I swore I heard her voice, whispering from the screen, calling my name, asking me to leave. Other times, the whisper told me not to leave, to watch, to wait. I tried to tell the detective assigned to the case. I even showed her the app and the last few seconds of footage. She looked at me with that mix of pity and disbelief that everyone does when I talk about this. "It's impossible," she said. "This isn't real." But she didn't leave. She didn't walk away. She sat down and waited for me to explain every detail, every second, and I did. And yet, even as I spoke, I realized I couldn't describe the way that reflection moved. The subtle lag between Lena and the other face. I couldn't explain how the shadows behind her bent in unnatural angles. or how the sound of her breathing sometimes came from the wrong direction. Every word felt like a compromise, a lie by omission. But even then, the detective didn't leave. And that made me feel worse. Like I had to prove it wasn't my fault. Like I had to justify my obsession. The days that followed were worse. Her messages kept coming, or at least what I thought were her messages. Texts sent from her number at impossible hours. Sometimes answering questions I hadn't asked. Sometimes asking questions I hadn't thought. The app would glitch, showing her location in places she had never visited. Or maybe she had. I couldn't trust anything anymore. Not her messages, not the reflections, not even myself. Every time I checked my mirror, I expected to see her standing there, smiling, waiting for me to notice the face behind her that she never mentioned. And sometimes, just for a second, I did. Then the night came when I finally tried to destroy the evidence. I deleted the app. I smashed the phone against the wall. I set the broken pieces in a box and left it in the garage. And I convinced myself that would be the end. But it wasn't. Because at exactly 11:59 p.m. that same night, my phone buzzed. A notification from her, or from what claimed to be her. I didn't even have the phone with MIT was the backup. The one I thought had been wiped. And on the screen, a single image, the same selfie, same smile, same reflection, same other face. Only this time, it looked closer, sharper, more real. I don't know how to explain the next few hours. I just sat there, watching, listening, too afraid to move. I thought maybe if I blinked, it would stop. But it didn't. And that's when I realized that whatever was behind her reflection, the thing wearing her smile, the thing that had been in the shadows all along, was learning from me, watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. And that's when the knock came at the door again. Not 3 slow taps this time. Not subtle. It was fast, insistent, deliberate. I wanted to run, but my body froze. And then my phone buzzed once more. A message. From Lena. From her number. From her voice. The text read, "I'm still here. I never left." I stared at the message for what felt like hours. I don't know if she wrote it. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if that's even her number. I know only one thing. The version of the story I've told you, the one where midnight was the beginning, where she disappeared, where I didn't know, is already wrong. The real story, the one I can't take back, the one that haunts every reflection and every shadow in my apartment, is still unfolding. And I'm part of it. Maybe I was always part of it. Maybe watching, recording, analyzing, obsessing it brought it here. It made it wait for me. It made me see it in her reflection before anyone else could. So if you're hearing this, if you're watching, I need you to remember one thing. Don't trust the selfies. Don't trust the messages. Don't trust your own reflection when it seems empty. Because what's behind it might already be watching you. And once it's seen you, it won't forget. I think I see it now. Story number 1, I swear the street was still there when I left. But when I came back, minutes later it was gone. All of it. And before you judge me, just know, I didn't imagine it. I couldn't have. Not after what was waiting in the dark. This hook creates contradiction. How can a street vanish within minutes? Why is the narrator defensive? Why does he say he couldn't have imagined? Does that imply he has hallucinated before? I know you're not going to believe me, but the street was already wrong before anything even happened. And the worst part is, I'd been pretending not to notice for years. Maybe that's why I kept filming that night, even when every part of me told me to run. I needed proof for you, or maybe for myself, because I knew nobody would trust my version otherwise. Honestly, I don't trust my version half the time. Halloween used to be loud on our block. Kids running around, plastic masks scraping against cold air, cheap porch speakers looping the same spooky music until the batteries died. But that night, everything felt muted, like sound wasn't traveling right. Even the wind seemed quieter. I remember thinking it felt like someone had draped a heavy sheet over the entire neighborhood. But I didn't say anything to Mia. I didn't want her accusing me of starting again. She was already on edge when she met me at the end of the driveway. She had her arms crossed, hoodie sleeves pulled over her palms the way she used to when she was younger. She was 20 now, but in that moment she looked 13 small, guarded and tired of my excuses. I almost said something to break the tension, but every joke I could think of felt fake, and she would have heard that. "Mum said you'd show up late," she muttered. Not hello, not I missed you, just that. I didn't say anything back right away, mostly because the house across the street caught my attention. Every porch was dark, except one, the Barker place. They'd carved dozens of jack-o'-lanterns every year, lining the steps, the railing, even the mailbox. But this year, only a single pumpkin sat out front, and it glowed too brightly, like the candle inside was burning hotter than it should. The light didn't flicker, it pulsed. "Are you listening to me, or what?" Mia snapped. I forced myself to look at her, not the pumpkin. "Yeah, sorry. Long day." I shouldn't have said that. She hates when I say things like that, vague, dismissive, the kind of line I used to use when I was lying. Her eyes narrowed, and I felt the distance between us stretch wider. I wanted to tell her I was actually trying. I wanted to explain that I'd come back because of her, because of what she told me last month, because I couldn't ignore it anymore. But I couldn't find the right moment. Or maybe I didn't want to find it. We walked toward the house together, keeping an awkward space between us, like two magnets flipped the wrong way. The sound of our footsteps on the pavement felt too loud, echoing against houses that should have been buzzing with decorations and motion sensor, which cackles. I looked around again, no kids, no parents, no porch lights, just that one glowing jack-o'-lantern across the street watching us. "Okay, seriously," Mia said, lowering her voice. "Are you seeing this? Why is the street empty?" "I don't know," I said. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. She studied my face, trying to see if I knew more than I was letting on. I forced myself to hold her gaze, even though everything in me wanted to look away. She always knew when I hid something, always. But this time, I wasn't hiding something. I was hiding everything. We reached our front steps. Mum had left a bowl of candy out with a handwritten note that said "Take 2", which made no sense because Mia and I both knew nobody had come by. The wrappers in the bowl were neatly arranged, untouched. I pretended not to notice and reached for the door, but Mia grabbed my wrist. "You feel it too," she whispered. Don't lie, it wasn't a question. It wasn't even an accusation. It was a plea. I froze. The warmth of her hand on my wrist felt unnaturally hot, or maybe my skin was just cold. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She let me go and walked inside ahead of me, shaking her head. For a second, I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She'd gotten better at hiding things too. I followed her in. But before I closed the door, I glanced back at the Barker house. The pumpkin's face seemed different. I know how that sounds, trust me. I do, but the carved grin looked wider, like someone had deepened the cut. I blinked hard, and it looked normal again. Or maybe I'd just convinced myself it did. Inside the house felt cramped and warm, a sharp contrast to the cold, heavy air outside. Mum wasn't home. She'd left us a note about a last-minute shift at the hospital. I read it quickly, but I couldn't focus. Mia was staring out the window again, fixated on the single pumpkin across the street. "You remember what I told you?" she said quietly. I felt my stomach drop. "Mia, not now. When, then?" I didn't answer because there was no answer she'd accept. She didn't understand what it cost me to come back, what it cost me to stay. We sat in the dim living room for a while. No TV, no music, just silence. A silence that didn't feel natural. It pressed in from outside, thick and heavy, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. At 9:13 p.m., the first porch light on our street flickered out. We both saw it through the window. One moment, a warm glow. The next moment, darkness. Then another. Then another. Then another. Then another. Didn't. Things that nobody should know about anyone. Things that made me feel like I was inside a nightmare I couldn't wake from. After that night, everything became a blur. The phone notifications, the vibration alerts, the sound of her name echoing in empty rooms. I couldn't tell what was real and what my mind fabricated to punish me. I kept replaying the footage, trying to freeze frame the second face, trying to prove it to myself. Every time I did, it felt like someone or something was moving closer behind her reflection. And the worst part, sometimes I swore I heard her voice, whispering from the screen, calling my name, asking me to leave. Other times, the whisper told me not to leave, to watch, to wait. I tried to tell the detective assigned to the case. I even showed her the app and the last few seconds of footage. She looked at me with that mix of pity and disbelief that everyone does when I talk about this. "It's impossible," she said. "This isn't real." But she didn't leave. She didn't walk away. She sat down and waited for me to explain every detail, every second, and I did. And yet, even as I spoke, I realized I couldn't describe the way that reflection moved. The subtle lag between Lena and the other face. I couldn't explain how the shadows behind her bent in unnatural angles, or how the sound of her breathing sometimes came from the wrong direction. Every word felt like a compromise, a lie by omission. But even then, the detective didn't leave. And that made me feel worse. Like I had to prove it wasn't my fault. Like I had to justify my obsession. The days that followed were worse. Her messages kept coming, or at least what I thought were her messages. Texts sent from her number at impossible hours. Sometimes answering questions I hadn't asked. Sometimes asking questions I hadn't thought. The app would glitch, showing her location in places she had never visited. Or maybe she had. I couldn't trust anything anymore. Not her messages, not the reflections, not even myself. Every time I checked my mirror, I expected to see her standing there, smiling, waiting for me to notice the face behind her that she never mentioned. And sometimes, just for a second, I did. Then the night came when I finally tried to destroy the evidence. I deleted the app. I smashed the phone against the wall. I set the broken pieces in a box and left it in the garage. And I convinced myself that would be the end. But it wasn't. because at exactly 11:59 p.m. that same night, my phone buzzed. A notification from her, or from what claimed to be her. I didn't even have the phone with MIT was the backup, the one I thought had been wiped. And on the screen, a single image, the same selfie, same smile, same reflection, same other face. Only this time, it looked closer, sharper, more real. I don't know how to explain the next few hours. I just sat there, watching, listening, too afraid to move. I thought maybe if I blinked, it would stop. But it didn't. And that's when I realized that whatever was behind her reflection, the thing wearing her smile, the thing that had been in the shadows all along, was learning from me, watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. And that's when the knock came at the door again. Not 3 slow taps this time. Not subtle. It was fast, insistent, deliberate. I wanted to run, but my body froze. And then my phone buzzed once more. A message. From Lena. From her number. From her voice. The text read, "I'm still here. I never left." I stared at the message for what felt like hours. I don't know if she wrote it. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if that's even her number. I know only one thing. The version of the story I've told you, the one where midnight was the beginning, where she disappeared, where I didn't know, is already wrong. The real story, the one I can't take back, the one that haunts every reflection and every shadow in my apartment, is still unfolding. And I'm part of it. Maybe I was always part of it. Maybe watching, recording, analyzing, obsessing, it brought it here. It made it wait for me.